Crazy Bernie has just entered the race. That a tweet from Donald Trump after progressive Vermont U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders on Tuesday announced that he was running for the Democratic nomination for U.S. president in 2020. Now, back in 2016, Sanders garnered fervent grassroots support and pushed the Democratic Party sharply to the left at age 77. Can he actually win his party's nomination? We're joined here in the studio by our White House correspondent, Philip Crowther.
Good to be with you.
Thanks for making the trip across the ocean.
It's a pleasure.
Philip, I'll tell you, first of all, the answer to that question from Donald Trump in the past few days. He said, personally, I think he missed his time, but I like Bernie.
Yeah, and I think Donald Trump is more than happy to have Bernie Sanders in the race, because what we've seen from the president so far and from his campaign team is they really want to make this election about a defeat of socialism, as strange as it sounds. But the president believes that the Democratic Party is becoming more socialist, and with Bernie Sanders, he will have a perfect person to criticize, along with Elizabeth Warren, for example, the senator from Massachusetts. Both of them, the president believes to be radical socialists, and that's very much the tone that this White House has had, and this president as well. He wants to make the Democratic Party look like a party that is shifting radically to the left, where the likes of Bernie Sanders are in the race, but others as well, the new generation that maybe would be saying that Bernie Sanders maybe doesn't have to be in the race because precisely what he stood for in 2016 is now almost mainstream with some of those other candidates among the many that are in the race right now.
Yeah, how far to the left is he? And also, Donald Trump, who ran as an insurgent, so did Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what they had in common, and that's one reason why Democrats who are so disappointed with the results in 2016 are still scratching their heads and still wondering, could we have done better with Bernie Sanders? Is he the one who could possibly have beaten Donald Trump because he was such an outsider as well, such an anti-establishment candidate? Now, there are so many candidates in the race that you'd think that Bernie Sanders might not be the furthest to the left, but he pretty much is, from those who we've seen so far. You've got everything in the Democratic field right now between those who've said they've got exploratory committees going. In other words, they haven't yet announced officially, others who have announced officially. You've got some who are centrists, others might be a little bit more to the left. Bernie Sanders is still pretty much the most to the left you'll find in the Democratic field.
It's funny because we've had the midterm elections come and go, and now after the midterms, the midway point of Donald Trump's first term in office, all of a sudden the candidates are coming out of the woodwork. And this could be unprecedented if we get up to what you're saying, what could be as many as 20?
Yeah, I think it might be up to 20 or so. We already know what this is going to look like, and maybe that is why these presidential candidates are getting into this race so quickly. It's just under a year ahead of the very first caucuses in Iowa. That'll be the very first primary in the Democratic race. So these are candidates who've still got a lot of convincing to do. We believe there might be up to 20. Now, what that'll look like come June, that's when the very first Democratic debate is supposed to happen. There could be up to 20 candidates on stage. Now, that's not going to happen, by the way. If there are up to 20 candidates, say, then there will be 2 debates. Each one would have 10 candidates on consecutive evenings. So we might have double the amount of debates from those that the Democrats had foreseen so far. It's an enormous field. But the Democratic Party is really insisting that that is what it wants. It doesn't want this campaign on the Democratic side to look like what the last one looked like. Just the two eventually fighting it out between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, with her looking like she was the ordained candidate throughout almost the whole race. They really want this to be a free-for-all where the strongest one will survive and will be able to go up against Donald Trump. Because remember, the one thing that Democrats want more than anything is a candidate who's able to beat Donald Trump. The political leanings don't matter all that much in the end.
And when Trump was elected, people said, all right, the unorthodox manner of campaigning and all that, he's going to tone it down. Of course, it's now been more than 2 years. Fair to say he hasn't toned it down. In fact, quite the opposite.
Yeah, our experience, of course, in the White House is that this is a president who's speaking exactly as he did as a candidate. He does so especially when he's out on the campaign trail, of course, something that he still does. He's not campaigning for anything specific, of course, but he still has these campaign events that do him so much good. This is where he wants to be adored by the crowds. So his style in the White House hasn't changed. This is something that was said so many times.
What's the rapport like with his staff?
You know, it's confrontational, as it should be, between the press and the White House. There's nothing wrong about that. Of course, strangely enough, we have this situation where officially this White House calls many of us fake news. He calls the media the enemy of the people. Now, you might be surprised that we have a pretty nice working relationship with the White House underneath all of that. We have discussions with the White House press team all the time. They have background briefings on the phone with us. They do want to get their message across, despite the fact that you will hear from the president that we are the enemy of the people. There is still more or less a functioning relationship. It's not as good as we'd want it to be, of course, but what we do get out of this White House is a lot of FaceTime with the president. It might not be formal. It might not be a formal press conference, but we get a lot of opportunities to shout questions.
So he likes the press in a way.
I think it's fair to say that Donald Trump loves the press. He loves the attention. He loves the media. I'm not entirely sure whether he loves journalists per se and what they write, but this is a president who loves the cameras coming in. He will order the cameras to come in when he wants to get something across. So I don't know whether he loves the press or journalists, but he certainly loves the cameras.
All right. White House correspondent for France 24, Philip Crowther, many thanks for stopping in while you're here in Paris.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.